Hello, and welcome to this presentation for 10 strategies for preparing for proficiency test to qualify for the Seal of Biliteracy. My name is Sherry Dickerson, and I'm a Spanish teacher in Oregon. I have been preparing my students for the Seal of Biliteracy assessments for the last 4 years. I would like to share some important things that I think are helpful strategies for you to prepare for a Seal of Biliteracy assessment as well. Strategy number 1 is to develop your language skills. Many of us have learned our languages through home by learning with our friends and family. Some of us have learned through school by taking courses at high school or university or beyond. And many of us have also learned our languages through work, whether our work requires us to travel abroad or learn another language for our workforce. And many of us have also had the opportunity to study abroad as well to develop our language skills or work abroad as well. Whatever your situation, I really highly encourage you to continue to develop your language skills before you take a proficiency assessment in order to qualify for a Seal of Biliteracy. The higher your language skills and the stronger language skills, the better outcomes you will have. You can expose yourself to as much language as you possibly can as well. You can read newspapers or magazines, listen to podcasts in the target language, watch TV shows potentially in your target language as well. Maybe even set your phone to the language that you are learning so that you have even more exposure to everything in the daily life activities that you do. You could also be listening to music consistently in the language that you are learning. Really important to take into consideration an academic course that might help you develop your academic proficiency and vocabulary. If you are able to, that's a really great opportunity to move your language from BICS, which is Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, to CALP, which is Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency Skills. And BICS really requires those day-to-day interactions and conversations with friends and family where we can really get by with talking about our plans, things that we like to do, pretty basic vocabulary. And that will accomplish a lot of what we can do with our language skills. And that's really great, but it's really important to make sure that we're moving toward a cognitive academic language proficiency, which is the type of language that you might need in a classroom or to learn content in your language. Think about studying abroad in another country and think about if you could actually understand maybe a lecture given in another classroom abroad. That's the kind of language that we're trying to work toward when we take up academic courses or when we expose ourselves to languages on our own by engaging in different content. If we can start reading articles or exploring different topics that have to do with politics and art, economics and science, for example, that will help us build our cognitive academic language proficiency, and it will help us increase our general proficiency levels as well. Strategy number 2 is to know why you want to get a language credential. There's several different types of seals of biliteracy. The global seal of biliteracy is a recognition or certificate of an individual's language skills in 2 or more languages. Every state has a different type of seal of biliteracy as well, so you could also qualify for a state seal of biliteracy in addition to a global seal. The benefits of having a seal of biliteracy include that credentials really matter, right? Nowadays, we're trying to figure out how to get early admission to colleges, increase our competitiveness in college applications. We can also put it on our job resumes and CVs to stand apart from other applicants for a specific job that we're applying for. And we can also use this for advanced placement at some points in some colleges and universities, in addition to potentially receiving college credit. It also quantifies our skills, right? When we say that we are proficient in Spanish or French or German or Chinese, we don't really ever have something to say like what our actual proficiency level is. So by being able to take an assessment to demonstrate your skills and show exactly where you are on the continuum, it's really helpful for employers or colleges and universities to know what your level is and have a paper to back that up. So then strategy number 3 is to know your test options and requirements. There are lots of different tests that you can take, and these are some of the tests that you can take for the global seal of biliteracy. Depending on whether or not you are applying for also a state seal of biliteracy, your exam requirements might look a little different. This is an example of some of those options, but every state might have different requirements. So be sure to check with your state seal requirements before you test as well to make sure that you can choose a test that would accomplish both the global seal and the state seal, depending on your goals. What might these tests look like? That's a big question that we have often. It depends on the test, right? But many of them, most of them, will assess your reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills. And then they will give you a report that demonstrates your skills on each of those. If you're taking an AP assessment, you might get an overall score, but many of these other ones, like the STAMP test or the Apple test or the ALTA test, they will give you proficiency ratings on each of those skills. So it's really important to understand the actual proficiency levels because we also need to know where we're going and what we're trying to achieve when we take these assessments. This is an example of some of the actual proficiency levels from novice to intermediate to advanced, superior, and distinguished. As you can see, the progression from novice starts with listing, naming, and identifying things. That's where we start when we're just starting to learn a language. We work our way up into the intermediate section by starting to use sentences, expressing our own thoughts, and asking questions. When we move from intermediate high to advanced, we start to use paragraphs to identify our ideas, and then we can also talk and write within a variety of time frames. We ask probing questions, and this is where we get into those academic and social topics. Actual proficiency guidelines are organized by proficiency level. They have can-do statements and different benchmarks that you can see, so you can really identify where you might be on the continuum even before you start preparing for your exam. It's a really great idea to go to the ACTFL website and look at different samples of listening, reading, speaking, and writing for proficiency level. So if you are shooting for an intermediate high or an advanced low, you might start there and just see what that looks like. And if you're not quite there yet, see how you can make yourself a goal to get your language skills there. This is another great way to think about how to level up your language. If you're starting from novice or intermediate and you want to go to advanced, what are the ways that we can do to increase our language skills? First of all, we need to start with words, then we go from lists of phrases, then we make sentences, and then we keep using sentences, right? We can go into creating paragraphs and more extended writing as well. So this is a pathway to proficiency that I like to show my students to demonstrate how this progression works. When we're using novice words, we use pretty basic words, those BICS skills, right? Even in intermediate, we are mainly relying on BICS skills, those basic interpersonal skills. And then when we're using a language that refers to maybe intermediate, mid, high, and advanced, we're using connecting ideas, we're expanding our ideas and sentences. We are also using complex vocabulary and language and grammar to express our ideas. So this is a really great way just to see how you can kind of develop your language skills over time, and it is a pathway to proficiency. It takes time to develop a language. Another strategy is to level up your language skills. How do you do this? Well, first you start with those novice skills. You start with listing, naming, and identifying things. Then you start to put together some complete sentences. You start to express your own thoughts and opinions. Then you expand your sentences with connecting words and transitions until you start to write paragraphs. So as you can see, you start thinking about how to level up your language skills with anything that you possibly do. This is something that I like to show my students to think about how to level up, okay? When you're thinking about how to expand a sentence to increase your detail and your complexity of your ideas, you can ask yourself, what, how, when, where, with whom, and why. And then expand on each of those things with as much detail as you can with many of the sentences that you write in a writing prompt, for example. This is an example of what you might do to elaborate this sentence, for example. If I were going to answer, what do I like to do in my free time? I could say just, I like to hike, right? But that's not very detailed, okay? If I want to expand my ideas, I might say something like, I like to hike with my friends at least 4 days a week in the mountains. Why? Because I love nature and want to get some exercise in the fresh air. Now that is detail, right? That's elaborating our responses with some supporting ideas. This is another example that I have in Spanish that I usually show my students as well. Same idea. The left column is just a 2, maybe 3-word sentence. Yo nadé. Okay, I swam. It's a sentence. It's got a subject and a verb. But if I add some more detail, I can say yo nadé en la playa. I swam at the beach or in the ocean. I can give some more ideas to elaborate, right? I could even do even further and say, yo nadé en la playa por una hora. I can say how long I swam, right? So by adding more details, we can expand our language complexity. If you are looking for an intermediate, mid, high, or advanced level proficiency on any of these proficiency tests, I really encourage you to think about how you can add more detail to your writing. Your strategy number 6 is to self-assess your language skills. So this means that you might look at some of the can-do statements, which are either on the actual proficiency guidelines website, or this is an example of an assessment's actual can-do statements self-check that you can also use. It's in their Power Up guide that I've also linked at the end of this presentation for you. And you can also just check it out and say, okay, can I do this? All right, where am I? And where do I need to go to level up my language? So by self-reflecting, you can also make yourself some really strong goals for your future. How can you move from intermediate low to intermediate mid? What do you need to do to practice your skills to get there? Strategy number 7 is to take a practice test. Practice tests obviously look different depending on the type of test that you're going to take. So first of all, choose the test or assessment that you're going to take and then learn about it, right? Look at the website, try to find out what information you can glean from them. And many of them will have practice tests. If you're taking an AP test, there are many practice tests that are available online or in different workbooks. So I really encourage you to know what the guidelines are for those tests and how they're going to work before you take them. This is an example of the AP language and culture topics, right? And then interpersonal writing skills assessment. There's an Apple Form B with the interpersonal speaking, ALTA test for speaking and listening as well. So they all look a little different, but they all are assessing your language skills. Interpretive tasks might look like reading or listening to something and answering some questions about things. So you see some different examples from the Stamp 4S, the AP language and culture exam, and then the Apple Form B again as well here. Presentational tasks usually refer to when we're writing or speaking in the language. So you might write about a prompt, you might speak about a prompt as well, but you're also just showing your language. And that's where those ideas for leveling up your language and expanding your ideas really come into play here. This is a really important part for expanding your ideas and then pushing yourself to the next proficiency level to demonstrate your language skills the best you possibly can. Strategy number 8 is to find samples of each proficiency level. It's very helpful to just know what those look like. You can read the actual descriptors, but once you actually see some writing in real life, it'll really help you to identify what you need to do to perform at those levels. This is a sample prompt that I usually use with my students to give them a little bit of practice. It is in Spanish, but it really just talks about machines and robots, like what types of things do they have to offer? Are they better than humans? What are some things that we could learn about when we use machines and robots? And students have to write as much as they possibly can when they write this prompt. This is an example of some of the different prompts that my students have written. At an intermediate mid level, students are writing sentences. They have quite a few ideas. They're demonstrating what they think, right? But then when they get to intermediate high, they use a lot more transition words and they elaborate on their ideas and tell me why. Use supporting evidence as well. When they get to the advanced low, it's way longer, right? More detail, supporting information, more complex language, varied vocabulary, and grammatical structures. So that's what we're striving for as we move from proficiency level to proficiency level. Strategy number 9 is to sign up for an exam and show your skills. So depending on the type of credential you are looking for, you will sign up for a test, right? So if you're looking at the Global SEAL qualified test, you would look on their website and see which ones are required. You can take one of any of these, right? So you choose one that looks like it's going to work for you and your language goals, and then figure out how to sign up to take the assessment, okay? If you are looking for something for your state seal of biliteracy, you do want to check on your state's website to see what their state requirements are for testing, because they're all very different. They're also different in the type of language that they're looking for. So for example, the Global SEAL has functional fluency, which means that you are scoring at intermediate mid, or you have a working fluency that you can score at advanced low on a proficiency test. So depending on that, think about the exam that you want to take and what you want to achieve with your language credentials. So strategy number 10 is to gain more language experience and aim for a higher score in a future language proficiency assessment. As we know, language is not static. It doesn't stay the same over time. As we get more exposure to language, our language skills improve. So if you don't score the best on your proficiency test the first time, that's okay, right? You know what skills you need to work on to improve. You can also potentially just score, for example, at the functional level in a proficiency test. You might be an intermediate mid, and that's totally fine, right? And then you might say, okay, I'm going to strive for working fluency, which means I need to get to the advanced low. How am I going to do that? What goals do I have, and what strategies can I use to make myself get there? So you can take these tests more than once, right? You can continue to increase your skills. And many students will see this happen. Maybe they'll take the proficiency assessments during different times of their high school or college career to demonstrate that growth as well and to work towards their goals. So continue to practice your skills and continue to increase your proficiency. Then celebrate your language skills and demonstrate those to the world. Here are some resources that I have put together that I thought would be helpful for you, so you can use those as well. The actual proficiency guidelines are very helpful for knowing what those proficiency levels are. The Global SEAL of Biliteracy is a really great resource with the different types of tests that you can take and what you can do to achieve your proficiency, your Global SEAL. And then the Avant Assessment Power Guides are also very helpful for identifying, using some of those checklists as well to identify your skills as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you the best.